Hey, folks, I'd be lying to you if I didn't tell you I'm a little bit nervous about this conversations on race. I don't know about you, Anna, but I am just, as we have gotten to do this broadcast and talk to people about it. There have been people who've had so many different thoughts about what it should look like and what's appropriate to say and what's or not. I want to say that I believe fundamentally that most people best they can, and that people want to get better. And I assume that people who are watching this are doing this because figure out how to make the world a better place. And so I think that that's the spirit that we're going into this conversation. But one of the things that I'm kind of excited about doing this day is that today's kind of a historic day. It was an accident, right? You want to talk about it?
Yeah. So today is the 57th anniversary of Martin Luther King's March on Washington, where he gave the I Have a Dream speech. We didn't plan it that way. We actually were supposed to originally have our talk on the 14th, and it didn't work out. So I feel like it was divine intervention for it to happen the way that it did. And it's special to me, too, because my dad, who's 72 years old, he just sent me a picture a little while ago. My dad is in Washington today. My dad, who grew up, was an adult already, but grew up with a father who was very involved in civil rights, and a family that was very involved in civil rights. So for my dad to be there today, my only regret is that I couldn't be there with him. So yeah, historic day, awesome day, special day for us to be having this conversation.
Was your dad or grandfather actually there for the march?
I don't know that my grandfather was. I know that my dad wasn't. My grandfather might have been, though, because my grandfather was very active in the 60s. And honestly, not just the 60s. My grandfather was an activist all the way up until the day that he died at 88 years old. And so my dad, came to the game a little bit late, maybe. But my dad is there. He's there now. So
that is, I would love to hear I hardly imagine how powerful it would be to be there today and to relive that moment. And it truly was, that speech, of course, just continues. It's really remarkable that we're almost 6 years in. That speech just us and taught us and encourages us and teaches us to be better about this. So, couple things. This recording will end up living in 3 places. We actually have it live streaming to the Senior Living Foresight YouTube channel. We have it live streaming to the Senior Living Leadership Facebook group, and it's also live streaming to my LinkedIn profile page. And the recording will automatically be saved. If you're watching this later, again, thank you for taking the time to watch it as we talk about this important topic. And please share the recording out with people. So, Anna, I want to actually start by having you talk a little bit about actually, I'm going to back up. I do one other thing. So, tell me what you do today in the senior living space.
So Ayana King, and
Ayana, yeah.
It happens all the time, but I used to never correct anyone. But I'm 40 now. We have a different way of doing things when we're 40 plus. So yeah, I want to be called by the name my mother gave me,
You bet.
I'm a King, and my business is Maximum Communications, and Maximum Communications is really 2-part. It's 1 part consulting, where I do a lot of content strategy consulting and coaching, social media, reputation management, PR. But the second part of my business is all about advocacy and talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace. But senior living is near and dear to my heart. It's special to me because when I decided to go back and get my degree and finish my schooling, secondary, college, when I did that, I went into the senior space just thinking I'm going to be there just long enough so that I can finish this internship. I needed something that was flexible, and I've always loved seniors from the time I was a little girl. You're going to find me playing on Mrs. Smith's porch before you're going to find me playing with my friends down the street. And I said, let me go down the street to this community that I know about, and let me just see if I can get a job there while I'm finishing school. And that's really all it took. As soon as I got my foot in the door there, I found that this was the industry that I loved. This is where I was supposed to be. And so to be able to cut my teeth in the communications space where I had gotten my degree at, talking about crisis communications, talking about social media, that was really important. So that's where I am now. And when I left corporate, when I left working for someone else and pursued working for myself, that fire never left. And in fact, it started blazing. And I think that's because I was finally able to do the things that I wanted to do and say the things that I wanted to say without fear of, people being upset about me saying really what today I will tell you is the truth. So thank you for having me, because it's time. It's past time, really.
It is. So why don't we start at the beginning of Ayana's life? You were born where, and what was it like growing up? And I know what it was like growing up as a white kid, and but I wish I could say. I mean, I guess in one sense I wish I could say it was the same, but I don't know that that's necessarily true. It's different. So let's start there.
Maybe it's the same, maybe it is different. So I grew up right outside of Detroit in a small city called Ecorse. Ecorse then was very diverse. Like, I grew up on a block, the only time in my life that I've lived in such a diverse community, where our neighbors were Hispanic, they were Indian, they were Black, they were white, they were immigrants. And that is the environment that I grew up on 12th Street in Ecorse, Michigan, as the only daughter, as the youngest of my mother and father. I have two older brothers, but my mom and dad always felt that it was important for us to travel. So as we were kids, whether it was up north or out to Yellowstone, we went different places. We experienced different people. And I can't say that everybody has that experience growing up where we grew up at, but that was our experience. And so I will say that I grew up wanting diversity, wanting to be around a lot of different people, a lot of different cultures, because it was something that I was used to. And so as an adult, when I left home and went out on my own, and I moved to really the city that was directly next door, Lincoln Park, to see how not diverse it was. I think that was the first time that I probably rode my bike around a neighborhood where I was like, this is not my neighborhood. I don't know that I should be riding my bike around here all the time. And quite honestly, sometimes I feel that way now in the city that I live in. The city is not very diverse. It has changed over time. But that doesn't always bother me. You know what I mean? Because as an adult, I am used to being really sometimes one of the only. And by the only, I mean the only Black person, the only Black woman in spaces that I'm in, especially now as a business owner. And when I network, it is not unheard of for me to be the only. And how do I manage that? And does it need managing? Do I need to align myself with other people? And all of that is true. And all of that, those are all questions that I ask myself when I go out and when I'm really starting relationships with people.
So can you talk to me about time you've experienced racism and what's that like and how often that's happened and that kind of thing?
So let me start out by saying this. I host workshops on these kinds of discussions where we really talk about diversity and inclusion. We talk about race, and the conversation is always like, tell me about a time, which is appropriate when we're all learning and stuff. But I will tell you that I can probably think of more times where I have not experienced some sort of racism, because it's a part of just the fabric. I know that upsets people to hear it, but it's the truth. It is really the fabric of America. And so just me being in spaces sometimes, everybody thinks like racism is this like overt, somebody's dropping an N-bomb. Somebody's like, it's not always like that, you guys. Sometimes it is microaggression, and sometimes it is comments like one that sticks out in my mind from the time I was 17 years old when someone said to me, "You're pretty for a Black girl." So it's sometimes that. It's sometimes, "Wow, you're so articulate. Wow, I didn't know you graduated." Sometimes racism looks like that. It does not always look like these overt, highly, charged situations. Sometimes it is really everyday small things that happen on a regular basis. And unless you've experienced that, you don't know what it is.
Well, and I'm going to give you, I'm not sure I'm really super comfortable, but I'm going to do it because I'm going to give you my confession along that lines of, I didn't actually say that, but I'm a big, tall guy. And so I tend to fly first class when I'm flying across the country. And I got on an airplane going from Nashville to Los Angeles. This has been about a year and a half ago. And there was this young Black kid who was my seatmate, and he had a hoodie on, and it was sort of pulled over. And at first he turned to me and he was with somebody else who was in another seat. So they were obviously sort of gotten on last and they weren't separated. And he started to ask me if I'd changed seats, which I would have done. But he said, "Nah, it's okay. Why don't you stay?" And so we started talking, and what he told me was that he was flying from Nashville to Los Angeles because he was an actor in a cable TV show. And we had this wonderful, wonderful conversation. So I asked him about his growing up, right? And I'm going to tell you that I expected him to tell me the story about this growing up in ghetto and coming out, right? But you know what? He grew up in just this middle-class family. His father's a football coach and mom's a school teacher or professor. And fortunately, I didn't say anything, but I realized, I thought, man, I built this stereotype that I expected that wasn't really fair. And it was a good learning experience, although a little bit embarrassing. So
let me tell you, Steve, like why on my end, on the Black end, why it's embarrassing for you, but it's dangerous for us. Because the way you saw him, you saw him as somebody that like grew up in the ghetto. So what if he did?
Yep.
So what if he did? And just that perception, that perception of seeing a Black person, a Black face, keeps us from getting jobs. Keeps us from, when we get a job, keeps us from getting promoted, keeps us from getting the same wage. It keeps us stuck. So I'm so glad that we're having this conversation, because you had the guts to say that. There's a lot of people who either are watching or will be watching who they got a gut check when you said that, because they feel the same way. And I'm telling you that is racism. That's what it is. Yeah. That is racism. So when people ask what is racism? It's that. It's those small things that happen that for you might be embarrassing when you understand it, because it's unconscious bias, right? It's not something that you meant to think. It just happened, which happens on everybody's end. I want to point that out. But for you, what might have been an embarrassing moment, for him, what we have to do? We have to go out of our way to make sure that you're comfortable. So what that might look like is, for me, maybe I would not wear my hair to work like this, which I did, by the way. I did. I did not when I started, but I did, because I was like, you know what? Who cares? I can get the work done. If I want to wear a doggone scarf to work and then take it off, why do you care? Why does my being Black so offend you that you want me to change to make you feel comfortable? I'm not. Look at this, ever again. It won't happen, because now what we have to do is we have to have these kinds of conversations so that we understand how racism happens. We understand that it's not these overt things that are so life-changing, which sometimes they are, but sometimes it's these little things that really just keep us behind. So thank you for sharing that. And I just want to share something too. When I do my workshops, I'm transparent too. And one of the things I say is, I don't call myself an expert in diversity, equity, and inclusion. I call myself an emerging expert, because I'm always learning. I'm always growing. That's what it is. And I have my own unconscious bias things that I have to work on, that I have to work really hard at. And the one that I like to share with people is that for a very long time, I would profile white men in pickup trucks all the time. And let me tell you something. If you have an American flag, I already see you. Like, that's how I felt. Yeah. But let me also tell you that my husband is white and he drives a pickup truck. And so just to check my own unconscious bias that day, and I don't know what it was, maybe it was spirit, but to have that come to my eyes, to the 4 parts of my brain where I really saw what I was doing and thought about how some people, some Black people, some brown people might see my own husband that way, bothered me. It bothered me. So our unconscious bias, our racism, it has to bother us enough to want to do something about it. And if we are leaders, and I'm talking specifically to leaders, it starts with us. It has to.
So I want to actually explore that a little bit. I think one of the huge challenges that senior living leaders face, and I want to get a little bit to some of the leadership inequities in a minute, but we have largely white, educated, mix of males and females. I think we're actually maybe even a little bit more females who are executive directors in senior living communities. And they are largely supervising a group of people who are on the front line, who are majority non-white, often from not just African American, but or non-white, but often are people have come from completely different cultures, from Africa, from Jamaica, from one of the Central South American countries. And so what I, as a educated white person, see, and what seems obvious to me, and what seems obvious to somebody who's come up in a very different cultural environment, may not be the same. What's maybe obvious to me is probably not necessarily obvious to them. And the same thing is true. Any thoughts on how to bridge that gap as a leader?
So first of all, I think like leaders have to be able to see that, because unfortunately, because we don't have a lot of diversity there's not a lot of diversity in thought either. And so if you don't even have people of color, be they Black or brown, if you don't invite them to the table, you don't know you're wrong. And guess what happens? We talk about you behind your back. We know which companies we don't want to work for. We go there in desperation. Yeah. So when you talk about turnover, that's where it comes from. So if we want to do something about it, first of all, like, what are we doing in our hiring practices? I'm so tired of people saying, well, we can't find anybody that wants to work. That's a lie. Have you partnered with any HBCUs? Do you know what an HBCU is? So there are some things that we can do at the leadership level that I think does not get done. But the other thing is, we don't empower our frontline workers to come and talk to us. And I'll tell you why that happens. It's because if you want real change in your community, in your organization, there needs to be allies there. And you hear all of this about allies all the time now. And allies are important because an ally is somebody who stands in the gap for you. So if I see something as a Black woman that's wrong, I should be empowered to go to someone who I trust and say something. And I will tell you that I did that. I didn't do it with the right people, for sure. But ultimately, I decided to leave for a number of reasons. But this is what happens. You lose good people who are hardworking, who could really point out some of the stuff that hurts your reputation later on, but you don't empower them to speak up. So as leaders, do we care enough to ask our hourly workers? Because that's what it is, right? Do we care enough to ask them what their experience is? And then that's the other thing that we have to see. I think that leaders who, for lack of a better term, just like white people, if you are in a position of leadership, what you really have to be able to do is be empathetic. And that's not easy for everybody. Like, not everyone is naturally empathetic, and it might be something that you have to work on. But I will tell you what happens when people of color come to your community, whether they be resident or team members. And I love to use my own dad as an example. My dad is 72 years old. And if my dad moved into senior living right now, it would not bother him that he were the minority there. It's not a big deal for a lot of Black people, like, fine, okay, whatever. What will bother them, and when I mean them, I mean your Black residents who may be looking at your community, is when they do see people who look like them, they're in hourly positions. They are housekeepers. They are dietary aides. They are caregivers. So you say something when you don't say something. You show us who you are and who we're going to be to you in that instance. And, you know, leaders do not think about that. And I will tell you, I thought about that for years. And I talked to a very few people who I trusted about it, who were really my friends, who were not people who were in positions of leadership. One person I talked to who was regional, it went nowhere. So if you don't feel empowered to talk to people, and then you as a leader do not have an empathetic heart, and you can't hear what this person is telling you, everything will stay the same. And eventually what's going to happen is you're going to be in trouble, because this next generation is different. These baby boomers, my dad's age, they're different. They grew up multicultural, multi-generational, different political beliefs. And so when they come to a community, even people who are white, it might bother them. It may bother them. Now, it may not bother everybody, but this generation is changing. So I think as leaders, we have to explore, are we changing too? Because some of those old ideals that have been around since the 70s when your community's starting, they're going to die. They're going to die. And what are you going to do? That's how you have to think about it. That's true.
Yeah. So a question that came in my chat that I think is actually a crazy, simple question, but is actually something a lot of us who are white struggle with. Black versus African American.
So I think it's a personal preference. I am Black. It does not bother me. You can see it sometimes on people's faces. They'll say, it was that, and they try to find every other descriptor. Like, they're Black, okay? It's a Black person. It's not a swear word. Black is beautiful, all right? It's fine. It's fine to say that. And it's fine to say African American too. What it's not fine to say, which a disc jockey just in Ohio found out earlier this week, is it's not okay to call people colored, because that was a word that we try to throw out with Jim Crow. And if you don't know what Jim Crow is, that's another issue. So this is what happens. Yeah. We have a lot of non-Black and brown people, white people, in positions of leadership who are in charge of managing people they do not understand and who they do not care to understand. And this is the year of accountability. Hear me. You will get called out. You'll get called out, and it will hurt your reputation. Steve, you and I talked about like a post that we had both saw on social media, on LinkedIn. That was really, it wasn't nice. It wasn't nice. And so think about what a microaggression is. Think about how you talk to people and what you say and why you say it, because we just have to do better. So Black, African American, great. Colored, never. Negro, never. It's gone. It's dead.
Yeah. Well, and you referenced that post. Won't talk too much about it, but I want to say that I do want to just touch on this a minute, because I think it's an area that and I've got friends, relatives who look at it this way. There are the post was a version of All Lives Matter, and you've said in many places. Those who appreciate that we have a real problem in this country said, yeah, all lives matter, but the fire department doesn't put water on the house that's not burning down. And right now, the relationship where the Black community, not all the Black community, but large segments of the Black community are in society in America are in a terrible place, and it needs that attention. And so to say something like all lives matter, I find personally offensive. There might be a day 100 years from now I'll be dead by the way, unless some miracle happens with that guy in Silicon Valley who's trying to live forever, right? But these things are really just a couple of other comments I want to touch bases on. Jack Stern, who's actually, he and his wife are going to talk, I think, next week. He drives a pickup too. He's he's a white guy, his wife is black, and they're going to talk about their experience. And so he did ask if you would profile him too, which I thought was funny. This idea of allies and
the old Ayana would have probably unfairly profiled, but I'm telling you, when that hit me in my spirit, I was like, ooh, I don't like that. I don't like that. I want to be different. I want to explore that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I will tell you, I've actually been on the other side of that. We fell in my church. I think I've told you this story, but we fell in love in our church with this young single mom with like a 3-year-old and 5-year-old, lovely other kids. They're all growing up now. But the mom and dad, they'd grown up in terrible circumstances. Got married, and the wonderful family. The kids are young adults, beautiful young adults now. But when they were about 10 or 11, we decided we wanted to take them to Disney because they'd never experienced it. Dad and Mom were not married yet. Jack says he still sees other pickup trucks the same way. So that we decided to take him to Disneyland, and he was he just knew he couldn't trust white people to take care of his kids. And he actually had this miracle middle of the night experience immediately before, where God says, you know, those people love your kids like you do. And so we went and had a wonderful time. But it's hard for everybody, right? But that being said, it's not equal. And that's why we need to work on it. So do you have any thoughts on how we fix the leadership problem?
Yeah, I have a lot of. So first,
lay them on.
I think what needs to happen is that leadership needs to take a look around the table. So if you sit every Monday, every Wednesday, and you look around your table and everybody looks like you, maybe they're male, maybe they're female, but you don't have anybody of color. You don't have age diversity. You don't have diversity in abilities. There's a problem there. Why is that? And I think what really keeps people from asking that question is nobody likes to be labeled a racist. But let me tell you something. If you don't want to be labeled a racist, then do things to show that you aren't a racist. Period. Learn about other people, learn about other cultures, ask questions, bring folks to the table, ask them about their experience. And when they tell you something, listen to them. Resist the urge to, this does not feel comfortable. I feel like you're pointing the finger at me, so I'm going to shut down. Don't do that. There is such beauty and such grace in being vulnerable with people who are not like you. With talking about differences, not in making me your teacher, but in having a conversation with me. That's where you start. And the other thing is, I have clients all over. I have some of the most fantastic clients too. And that's because I am transparent. If you're coming to me, you already know who I am. And I don't mean you know who I am. I mean, you know how I feel about this stuff. You know my heart because I'm passionate about it. And so I have some really fantastic clients, but I've said to all of my clients very transparently, listen, when we do these workshops, everybody's going to be on. So when I say, if this doesn't come from the top, you should leave, I need you to know that some people are probably going to leave, because all of this, it has to come from the top. Because I'm telling you that in my experience, I had some key people who I really trusted, who I really cared about, and who I know really cared about me and still care about me. And I did not talk to them because I knew they couldn't help me, because it needed to come from the top. And it was clear that it was not going to come from the top for me. And so there are people in your communities who feel this way. And eventually it's going to affect your resident population, because again, this baby boomer generation is different. The people that we're catering to right now, the people that we are catering to right now, they will be dead. They're going to be gone in 10 years. So when you look at your life enrichment director who's Black or who's brown, and you say, just ignore Mr. So-and-so, he comes from a different generation. Don't excuse racism and then expect your staff to trust you, because we won't. And then again, when we leave, we're going to talk. We're going to talk. We're going to sing. That's what we're going to do. And you don't want that. You better be the leader that you say you want to be. Do the hard thing and learn. You know, we want to learn everything, right? Especially as leaders, we're reading books, we're watching documentaries. Learn how to be empathetic. It's not natural for everyone. You have to be able to experience other people and really show a genuine interest in them if you want them to trust you and if you want to lead them. So there's a lot of leaders. There are a lot of people high up in companies who are called leaders who are not. And there are a lot of people on the front lines who don't have a title at all, probably, who are really great leaders. So be open to everyone.
Yeah, and I think what you say is so true. I think empowering those frontline leaders. One of the questions that I think people who are in leadership who would like to make it better really struggle with is this: is that so I'm at a board meeting in my corporate senior living building, and I look around my table, and all I've got is white people.
Mm-hmm.
And so I look and I say, I need to fix this. But then what goes through people's heads, and I'll tell you that nobody's going to talk about this, but there are two things that go through people's heads. The first is, I don't know where to go find somebody who's black because the pool is so white. And the second thing is, I don't want it to look like I'm just hiring somebody because they're black. So,
Yep.
and that goes through people's heads. So I don't know what to do with that. Help me out.
No, I'm glad you brought that up because I don't know that I would have thought about that. I think about it all the time, but just, I don't know that I would have brought that today. So I'm glad you did. Well, I think let me tell you what I think happens wrong. Like what people do automatically that is just kind of gross is they look around the table, they see that and they go, I need to go hire some black and brown people. So then what they do is they go and hire a chief of diversity, right? I'm going to go hire me a chief officer of diversity and we're going to get this thing right. But they never do the work they need to do. And that whatever comes in and they see that, and you know what, they're gone in a year because you can't lead from a place of, it can't be reactionary, like you can't do this stuff as a reaction to. You have to be proactive in saying, okay, this is our board. This is who we have. Why don't we work to change ourselves first? Why don't we work to understand some things first? And then maybe why don't we build a coalition with some of our frontline workers, some folks in the middle, and our leadership team so that we can understand some things better. We have different input, and then maybe you're adding to that leadership team as time goes on. I think the worst thing you can do is look around and say, we've got a diversity problem. We need to hire for this. Because what people don't understand is that diversity is not inclusion. It's not the same thing. Diversity means we're all here. Inclusion means you're here and you're welcome. It means you're here and you've got a place at the table. It means you're empowered. It means I'm paying you like I'm paying everyone else. That's what it means. And we, as an organization in senior living, but across industries, I work with a lot of industries, we all get it wrong. So yes, it needs to come from the top, but it needs to be genuine. It needs to be a time of self-reflection. So maybe that team is going to say, you know what, we are going to work with somebody, ourselves, our core team, in really understanding what we need to understand. And then you know what, maybe we're going to talk with our HR teams about how can we look for talent, right? Because maybe what you're going to do is you're going to hire a firm that's what they do. That's what they're known for. They hire for diversity. That doesn't mean they're always hiring somebody black, but they're going to hire the right person and they're going to make sure you have diversity. And they're going to make sure they have the right people, not just the right face. So there are some things that we can do, but the conversation always has to start with, what am I doing? Not, I should do this. We're so reactionary. We have to be focused in what is the problem? Why is the problem? Now, what is my part in the problem? I will tell you, after I left senior living, I was so bitter. I was so hurt, just because I felt like I left because I didn't have another choice. Even though I knew that there were people there who really loved me, seriously. And I could feel that. I feel that today. But I'm gonna tell you, I have to also take responsibility. And I didn't say a word, not to the people who I should have been talking to. And when I left, I could have said I need an exit interview, and I could have said some things, and I didn't. So whose fault is that? Is it theirs or mine? It's mine. So I need to be responsible too, right? So we have to all be responsibility for wherever our part is. And if you are a leader and you're serious about being a strong leader, an empathetic leader, a leader that really inspires people, instead of pointing the finger at your HR department and at, this VP of that, or, this chief of that, where are you? What are you doing? How do you need to change? Because it starts with one of us.
Yeah. I love that so much. I think that it would be scary to do, but I'd love to see every CEO, every regional director, every executive director. Maybe you do it in some sort of a line where you do it in a meeting and say, go to your non-white team and just say, talk to me about what it's like and how we can make it better for you. I think that's what this is all about. It's about having conversation. I want to acknowledge some of the comments. Erica says communication and conversations come from relationship, and that is so important. So Jessica, you're yes.
Can I pause really quick? Because yes, conversation. I'm so glad Erica said that too, because right on the heels of what you said, which is go to your team members, and I'm going to tell you, do not go to your team members. Do not go to your team. Hear me, people. Do not. Especially if you don't have a relationship with these folks, if just your employees, if you've never asked about their children, if you don't know anything about them, but they show up to work, don't you dare go and ask them anything. You go find out. We get on this good internet for everything else except for the things that matter. Go pick up a doggone book, because there are lots of people who are reading right now about being an ally. They're reading about white fragility. They're reading about unconscious bias. We need to do our own work instead of making somebody else responsible, and especially people who are getting paid $10, $12, $15 an hour. Now you want them to be your teacher too? Absolutely not. Now, if you have a relationship with them, come ask me. But don't you dare come and ask me, knock on my door for anything when you haven't asked me anything about myself in the however many years I've been with you. Don't do it. So I'm so glad that Erica said communication and conversation. There has to be a trust built there. And if there's not, then it just does not work.
Yep. And Jessica suggests that all people in management ought to learn 5 things about Black history that you can incorporate into your community practice. Great idea. What else? Celebrate Christmas, Hanukkah, definitely help improve Cinco de Mayo, Chinese New Year's, Hanukkah, help improve staff to really celebrate the differences. So, and you're right, you've got to look at your own organizations for sure.
Yeah.
So the other thing I guess I find myself thinking is that maybe we need to have a long-term, that leadership needs to have a long-term strategy. Of saying we're going to find some, young people who maybe the best thing would be to get to know people and find those bright front people who are working on the front lines that you can mentor and nurture and take care of to become those leaders that we need. And so I just
let me just say something about that too. Like, yes, there are people in your communities. Let me tell you what I was so fortunate about. I was fortunate that I left a job where I was in education. I was working in a high school as a school operations manager when I went back to school. And when I started at the building, at the organization I was with, I left a job where I had a great salary. I started there making $11 an hour. And thankfully, by the grace of God, I had a manager who noticed me. She noticed me, and when it was time for me to graduate, it was because of her that I moved up into the corporate office. And after that, the ball was rolling. So I will say I had a manager, I had a leader, an executive director who saw me. She took the time to get to know me, and I was given an opportunity because of that. So when you talk about like, we don't know where to find talent, you've got talent in your communities. You just see them as hourly employees. You don't know if they're going to school. You haven't asked them what they did before they got to your community. So you assume that you don't have these really wonderful, brilliant minds who want to be a part of this industry, and they leave. So I just wanted to point that out really quick too. Like, you have talent. You have talent. You need to get to know them.
You know, it's interesting you say that, because as I've been talking to leaders in the face of the pandemic, and they've had to radically redo their life enrichment programs, one of the things I've heard from so many people was, well, we had to tap into our team members to do more life enrichment. And I had no idea that I had so many people who could sing, dance, draw, tell stories. They're really talking about frontline people because they didn't get to know them. And there's so much talent and skill in that front line if we just tapped into it. So beautiful stuff.
I feel so highly blessed and just fortunate that my manager did what she did for me, because maybe I wouldn't be in this industry. I don't know. And I just can't see myself doing anything else. Even though I have my own business, like, I'm so focused. I'm so happy too. Let me say this. There are senior living providers out there, skilled nursing providers out there. I have clients in this industry. I don't put anybody on front. I will let them speak for themselves. But it warmed my heart to see how many people really were saying to themselves, yeah, actually, Black lives do matter. We have not done such a great job of uplifting our team members, and we want to be different. I'm telling you, the first client that I got was before all of this, before the murder of George Floyd. It was before that. And to talk to this man and to have him ask the kinds of questions that he asked of me, to know that I beat out a large agency. I'm one person. When I tell you I knew that he was an ally and he didn't have to tell me, I knew that he was. And he's not the only one. I've had some really great conversations and some really great clients from this industry. So they're here, and they're ready to work. So that makes me really excited.
Yeah. And I actually want to applaud Brookdale. They've done a really nice job of being very deliberate and bringing on people who, a number of Black women leaders who are strong leaders in their own right, who happen to be Black, as opposed to picking them because they're Black. And I think they've actually set us a wonderful example for that. And I really do, I applaud what they're doing. So we've been going for just 40 minutes right now. We can go for an hour, but we probably should sort of start wrapping up. Give me sort of like 3 key takeaways that people ought to have from this conversation, and just your view of how to make it better.
Okay. Number one, I want you to understand that you have some biases that really keep you from making the workplace fair. We all do though. So there is a really great test that when I do workshops, I always ask. In episode 2, I do episode 2 that's all about empathy and allyship and unconscious bias. I do these workshops, and I always ask people to take this test that's called Project Implicit. And it's a Harvard study, and you can Google it, and it has all these modules that help you test out your own unconscious bias. And I always tell people the one that stood out to me that really bothered me, that I needed to work on, was it showed that I had a slight, even though it was slight, it felt like it was huge for me, a slight preference towards thin people. Well, I don't want to prefer anyone. I don't want to prefer any one group over another. So I had to start doing some work about that. And then talking to my friends, these are people who I've known all my life, and talking to some of my friends, they pointed out some things that I have said over the years that were deeply and incredibly offensive. So if I tell you anything, check your own biases first. That's number one, and understand that we all have them. Number 2, start educating yourself. There are a ton of books. There are a ton of documentaries, a ton of podcasts that really help explain the Black and brown experience in this country. And then number 3, once you learn, commit to sharing that information, okay? And I don't mean like going around waving your ally flag now. That's not what I mean. Like, that's the grossest thing, is like now making yourself the center. No, what you do is now you teach your loved ones, those people who are open to hearing you. Because I say this to all of my clients, I firmly believe, and in my heart, I really believe this. We are, besides COVID, we are at work with people that we work with more than we're at home. So if we can get this right in the workplace, we take it with us. We take it to our family, we take it to our friend groups, we change our communities. So those three things: understand you have unconscious bias, right? Do your homework so that you understand what it is and who it is and how you can be different, and then go share that information. Those are my three takeaways.
Good. And maybe I'd add to that, build relationships with your frontline staff, you know, right, regardless of ethnicity. So one more question that came in that Jack Stern asked that I think is really an important one is for you to talk a little bit about the black tax.
The black tax?
Yeah. And if that's not a comfortable term, Jack's actually going to be on in a couple of and I think next week, right, Jack? And we can dig into that. But it's sort of related. So it's sort of I think where I think he's going, and we'll dig into this with Jack, because it's actually interesting that he posted that, because we know there's a poverty tax that people who pay when they live in poor areas. They use check cashing services, payday loans, more milk costs are much more a gallon at the corner store. And I've been thinking a lot about how senior living communities actually started writing it, but I got an article in my head about how that's something senior living communities could do to make a huge difference for their front staff. So Lynn says human to human connections, which is that's really the key. We don't hate people. We don't look down on the people we're close to. And I just, so so it just is. This is huge. And you're right. I mean, people who are Erica, you're posting. I think what you're saying is that sometimes it's just the position, and people get so proud of their position that they don't build those relationships. And so it can be more than just ethnicity, right? It can be, I'm a big important person and you're just a peon, and I'm worried about that a lot. So
I think that happens a lot too. I think that happens a lot. But then what happens is, who is the peon? The lowest man on the totem pole, right? It's the guy that's cleaning the toilets. It's the woman who's changing diapers. It's the person who's cleaning off the tables, after people eat. So yeah, we have to think about all of those things. And one of the things that I'll say about HR, and I know a lot of companies that are doing this, their HR departments, is if you've never thought about doing blind resume reviews, do that. And that's where you take that name off of there. Take the name off, take the address off, look specifically at the skill set, because unconscious bias is so sneaky that it will change your name or change your mind about somebody whose name is Tanya versus somebody's name who's Tamika. You'll do that. You don't even know that you'll do that, but you'll do it. You'll do it.
Yep. Absolutely. Thank you very much. Thank you for sharing, being vulnerable. Yeah. Thank you for those of you who have watched. Thank you for those of you who will watch. Ayana, how do people get in touch with you? We'll put it in the posting too. But got to do a personal plug here for you as well. I think if somebody's really interested in diversity, they should be talking to you about how you can help them. So how do they get in touch with you?
I sure hope they would too. So Ayana King, you can find me on my website at Maximum Communications. That's www.getmaxcoms.com. So that's GETMAXCOMMS.com. You can find me on LinkedIn under Ayana D. King, and then you can find my business Facebook page under Maximum Communications. And thank you for your invite.
Yeah, we'll put some links in the comment section or in the posting session of the videos after we're done here. So thank you very much. We're about ultimately, we're doing this because we want to make the industry better. We make it better. I know the starfish story is so trite, right? But I believe in the starfish concept that you just change it one conversation at a time, and pretty soon, you know, you've got a ocean full of starfish. And so we've thrown a bunch of starfish back in the ocean today. Thank you very much. We're going to do this again next week. And frankly, if there's somebody that we should be talking to in this conversation that we haven't included, maybe we don't know about, would love to hear about that. We think that this ought to be more than 3 or 4 conversations, that it ought to go for a while, because we are making the world better with these conversations. Thanks everybody. Thanks for all the comments. I appreciate it. And watch again next week. Bye-bye.